On behalf of the staff and management of 2020 and Maier+Vidorno, it surely is my pleasure, my honor, and my great privilege to welcome you to our presentation today entitled, "Is Now the Time to Expand into India?" Now, you may have noticed that I changed the title. It originally was, "Why Expand into India?" But as we thought about it, we thought, go to a bigger subject, cover more ground, and address not only the why of it, but the when of it. So my friends, we're very pleased that you are here with us today, and let's review just what we're going to cover. We'll begin by discussing a few facts about India, its place in the world economy, and then a few factoids about India itself. From there, we will move into a discussion of who is investing in India, particularly in fiscal 2017, and what those companies and countries are investing in, what business sectors are drawing the most interest. From there, we will go into a study, a review of what we believe are six very compelling reasons why now is the time for you to consider expansion into India. We'll follow that with a review of 4 case studies, each one demonstrating a different mode or model of entry either into the Indian marketplace or an expansion therein. We will then discuss the role that a market entry specialist plays in your expansion into India and why we believe that Maier+Vidorno is well positioned to help you gain maximum results from your expansion into this dynamic economy. We'll finalize by reviewing everything we've talked about and then host a question and answer series at the end of the presentation. Now, at this point, my friend, our organizer is going to remove my image from the screen so that we can devote the entire screen to the information we're going to share with you. Again, thank you for being with us today. It's an honor, a privilege, and a great pleasure to be here. Let us begin by looking at the question, is now the time for destination India? India's global ranking, India scores well in 6 major categories. India is first among the world's top countries as a greenfield investment destination. It is first among the world's best countries to invest in. It is the first choice for tech MNCs to set up R&D facilities outside of their own home countries. India is among the top 10 in foreign direct investment destinations. It's the 6th largest manufacturing nation in the world. And lastly, it is the world's 7th most highly respected and valued brand. Fiscal 2017 GDP in India was $2,597 billion US dollars. And my friends, anytime we talk about currency during this presentation, we'll express that in US dollars. India's historic growth rate is 6.6%. This year, in terms of GDP, it's expected to be 7.4%. India is a very young country. Of the 1.2, 1.3 billion citizens, 600 million are under 25 years of age. India is the 2nd most populous country in the world, second only to China. The literacy rate of 74% is expanding and growing exponentially. In fiscal 2017, there was a 3% increase in the FDI to almost $62 billion. And interestingly enough, India is the world's largest democracy, where English is commonly spoken and is one of the 2 official government languages. What does that mean for you and I as American companies thinking of investing in India? Well, one, obviously the culture and all of the government regulations will not be identical, but you will find a certain comfort level that some things are done very similarly to how they're done here in the States. And communication is much easier than in some other emerging nations where English is not so commonly spoken. Let's take a look at the Indian GDP for the years 2008 to 2017, and let's express those graphically. you will see that in those 10 years, the growth in the GDP represents a 119% increase. If we look at 2018, where the GDP is expected to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $2,975 billion, the percentage increase in those 11 years becomes even more impressive. The economy is booming, it's sustainable, it's a very, very attractive place for us to consider expanding. Who's investing in India? In fiscal 2017, the companies in the US invested $3.7 billion US. Total investment in India during the fiscal year of 2017 was almost $62 billion. Surprisingly enough, the largest investor in India during that fiscal year was the country of Mauritius, followed by Singapore, Japan, the UK, with the Netherlands and the US tied at 6% each. If that's the investment flowing into India in fiscal 2017, what's that money being invested in? Well, let's take a look. Here is a breakdown of where the money, that $62 billion, went. The leading recipient was the services sector, followed by infrastructure. And I have to point out that infrastructure is one of the biggest reasons that the Indian economy is growing at such a rapid, sustainable rate. Then it's followed by telecommunications, computer hardware and software, the automotive industry, drugs and pharmaceuticals, trading, chemicals other than fertilizer, power, and lastly, the metallurgical industries. Is now the time to expand into India? Let us ask that question again and answer it by discussing 6 very compelling reasons why we believe the answer to that question is a resounding yes. First, sustainable business. McKinsey Global Institute estimates that by the year 2025, there will be 69 cities in India with a population of over 1 million each. This transition from the rural to the urban areas, in fact, by 2030, India's urban population is estimated to reach 590 million, up from 340 million in 2008. Now, just close your eyes for a second and imagine for that kind of a transition to take place. Imagine the investment in all facets of the infrastructure that has to happen, has to occur to accommodate this kind of growth. One of the things driving this growth is an initiative by the government called the Smart Cities Mission. This is a mission to create 100 citizen-friendly cities where housing will be good, where the roads will be good, the bridges will be good, the airports will be modern, the train stations, all types of transportation, streets, the utilities, anything to do with creating a friendly, livable environment for the citizens is being invested in, and it's built in such a way to be sustainable, to last and grow and expand as time goes on. What does that mean to you? What does that mean to me? Well, this societal transformation, in my mind, translates into dynamic opportunities for foreign investors. The second compelling reason that we believe so strongly in is the fact that the government is initiating very friendly business initiatives, beginning with the liberalization of the FDI policy, where companies investing in certain industries like electronics, with annual revenues up to and including 250 million, can enter the country of India through the automatic rule. They don't even have to apply to the government to invest in the country. In 2017, India implemented a one-nation tax rate, a one-nation goods and services tax rate that applies a uniform tax across the entire country. Prior to that, each of the different states had their own taxing structure, so that as goods and services moved from one state to another, different taxes were applied to the cost of that product. That's been done away with, and now a single goods and services tax applies. There are many tax and non-tax investment incentives in specific sectors and regions. For example, again, the electronics industry is a focus, as well as the northeast portion of the country, where certain tax incentives are available for companies that will either enter the electronics industry or other industries in the northeast section of the country, or electronics virtually countrywide. India has also created special economic zone incentives for manufacturing companies seeking entry into or expansion in the Indian marketplace. These incentives apply to those companies that locate in certain regions where the government believes that manufacturing should be most welcome and add to the Indian way of life. The Indian corporate income tax rate was reduced to 25%, again for companies generating annual revenue to 250 million US dollars. India understands and appreciates an inventor's right to protect their intellectual property. Hence, they have placed a great focus on protecting intellectual property ownership. Also, foreign direct investment has increased dramatically during the past 4 years to the point of 273 billion US dollars. In the previous 4 years, from 2010 or 2011 to 2014 inclusive, the FDI was 150 billion US dollars. Again, an increase of 123 billion US dollars as a direct result of these business-friendly initiatives started by the government. The third compelling reason why now is a time to invest in India. First, there is a strong emerging middle class. There is a low-cost labor force of over 500 million trained, educated Indians, ready, willing, and able to go to work for companies investing in the country. The working age group, that's measured in age from 15 to 59, is expected to be 64% of the population by 2026. That's 6 out of 10, almost 6.5 people out of 10 who are earning a wage, generating disposable discretionary income to purchase your goods, your services. India is a very young country with an average age of 29. In fact, it will be the world's youngest country by 2020. By comparison, today, the average age in the United States is 39, and in Canada, it's 42. It's interesting to note that India produces 1.2 engineers per year. That is more than China and the US combined, and adds 10 to 12 million people to the workforce per annum. Again, 10 to 12 million new people entering the workforce. That's new income, that's new spending power. Skill India is a strong initiative that's also making a difference. This is yet again another government initiative to train young people interested in becoming tradesmen, carpenters, electricians, plumbers, stonemasons, anything to do with supporting this growing economy and to provide the labor and the intelligence needed to support the tremendous investment in infrastructure that's taking place in India today and will continue for the foreseeable future. The bottom line, the end result, what does that mean to us? It's a young force with increasing discretionary purchasing power and an appetite for American products. The fourth compelling reason why now is the time to invest in India is the infrastructure growth that's taking place. There is an increased spending, dramatic increased spending on infrastructure in India. In fact, the government hiked the annual infrastructure spending to 92 billion US dollars in 2017, up from 75 billion in 2016. One of the great investments has been in renewable energy infrastructure. India had a program with a goal to generate 20 gigawatts of solar power by the year 2020. They, in fact, achieved that goal by 2016. This is just indicative of the real commitment that the government of India has made to building all facets of the infrastructure to serve the influx of investment coming into the country and forecasted to continue coming into the country for the foreseeable future. It's estimated by the World Bank that there will be an investment of $5 trillion in India, and this is needed to sustain India's economic growth through the year 2040. And we have to ask ourselves, with that kind of a number, $5 trillion, where is that money going to come from? Again, the World Bank estimates that India itself, the government, will be able to supply 4 of the $5 trillion, with companies seeking expansion into the marketplace, as well as investment bankers supplying the other $1 trillion. It's important to note that local Indian companies, by and large, lack the required high-tech competencies required to support this investment in infrastructure. How does that equate for you and for me? It means there are tremendous opportunities for international companies seeking a new and growing market. The fifth reason why we believe that India is a compelling place to be, and while now is the time to invest in India. And this is India's strategic location advantage. As you can see on the map on the screen, India is bordered by Pakistan, China, Nepal, Bhutan, Myanmar, and Bangladesh, all countries with whom India has a positive balance of trade, with the exception of China. And my friends, I don't think no one has a positive balance of trade with China. But what this means to you and I as world business players is that not only is there a dynamic growing market within the country of India itself, there is an export market in Pakistan, Nepal, Bhutan, Myanmar, and Bangladesh for products and services produced in India. Another factor that contributes to India's strategic advantage is the fact that it's surrounded on the left by the Arabian Sea, on the right by the Bay of Bengal, and to the south by the Indian Ocean, making ocean freight to and from India very easy. It should also be pointed out that India has access to the Middle Eastern markets because of their ability and so much ocean and water surrounding them, again, because the ocean freight is so accessible from and to India. The last compelling reason why we believe now is the time to invest in India is the tech startup boom that's just enveloping the country. India offers opportunity to participate in one of the richest tech startup innovation ecosystems in the world. In fact, in the last 3 years, tech startups have attracted over $20 billion. India's investment in technology infrastructure is driving this boom. A couple of examples. Digital payments using a free application program interface, again, free application program interface, exceeded all credit card payments in 2017. Think about what that means to businesses who were paying a fee to use credit card payments or to accept credit card payments previously. Now they can use a free API. That percent or 1.25%, or American Express, I believe, was 1.75%, now goes to their bottom line. India believes that its problems can be solved by leveraging technology, and an example of that is the Aadhaar system. This is a system based on biometric data, and to date, 1.2 billion Indians have supplied their biometric data, which allows the country to overcome one of its biggest problems, and that was corruption. Just last year, through the system of Aadhaar, the Indian government was able to authenticate 9 billion transactions. That means eliminating corruption from those 9 billion transactions. Money intended to go to a certain destination is now getting there, when previously different entities were siphoning off the money that was intended for good works within the Indian community. Having said all that, India's needs for tech expert international investors is creating unparalleled opportunities for such companies. My friends, let's take a look now at 4 case studies that will demonstrate how these companies either entered the Indian market or how they expanded their presence therein. The first is a North American automotive components manufacturer who engaged with an Indian company to develop new products. The problem developed that there was a complete lack of control over projects and cost. There were project delays and cost overruns, as well as many of the engineers with whom and in whom the U.S. company had invested substantial dollars in training them were leaving the company. At a point in time, the U.S. company said, no, we want to right these wrongs and we want to increase our sourcing of local products. What was the solution? Well, Maier+Vidorno set up an engineering services center for the current engineers. Through their HR department, hired new qualified engineers, and now Maier+Vidorno manages the back office services, the bookkeeping, the administration, and the reporting to ensure the seamless delivery of services, as well as setting up a sourcing team for vendor development to source local products. What was the value result? Operations in India added significant value to the head office. The company increased the Indian team by almost 50% in just 2 years. Now they have full control over their employees and their project timelines, and they are establishing an assembly plant. So this is an example of setting up, recruitment, and back office support for a company that was already working in India, but had to change or expand their presence therein. The second case study is about something we call business incubation, and this relates to a North American manufacturer of loading dock equipment, industrial doors, curtain walls, etc. This company had observed that the change in the Indian government and manufacturing picking up in the country would be a good time for them to evaluate whether the Indian market in 2015 was a place where they should be. They had the evaluation made and they decided to service the Indian market. Maier+Vidorno provided the market research upon which the decision was made. They provided the incubation solution to develop the business without incorporating an Indian subsidiary. In other words, this company was able to enter the Indian economy without establishing an official residence there, presence there. An employee was hired, trained in the U.S. That employee sits on Maier+Vidorno's payroll, and Maier+Vidorno takes charge of really supervising that employee and making sure that that employee pursues and accomplishes the sales goals that are established by the client, and then reports those success stories back to the client. That is the incubation process, where we actually incubate or nurture the growth of an entity that has a presence in India, but not an official government registered presence. The value result: the client now has a regional manager at their Mumbai location, partnerships with 8 distributors across India, and direct relationships with major customers in India. That all has happened since 2015 when the project began. The third case study is the setup of a sales subsidiary and back office support for one of the largest touchscreen display manufacturers in North America, who manufactures screens for the military, aerospace, medical, transportation industries, as well as retail point of sales applications. This company had a direct salesperson in India, but they wanted to expand that presence to not only provide sales, but they wanted to provide after the sales service, because this is a highly technical product that requires some engineering input. What was the solution? Maier+Vidorno's in-house legal and research teams consulted with them on possible entry routes, and it was determined that the best way was to establish a wholly owned subsidiary in India, and this was incorporated in mid-2017. The value result is that now the company has 3 full-time employees in India providing sales and after the sale support services, while Maier+Vidorno provides back office support at the Bangalore location. The last case study, very interesting. This is a pet food company from Canada, large Canadian manufacturer of premium pet food, who was wondering, is there a market in India for their premium pet food? But they didn't want to spend a lot of money to find out. And if there was a market, they didn't want to have a major investment to service that market. What was the solution? Maier+Vidorno conducted extensive market research to quantify and qualify the Indian market for premium pet food, as well as to identify what we believe were competent distributors interested in adding a premium line. What was the value result? Well, we presented 4 possible distributors to this company. They agreed that 3 of them are consistent with their value system, and the 3 of them would make good distributors, and at this time are negotiating contracts with them. This was an example of a distributor partner search market entry. Okay, let us review why now is the time, why we really believe now is a good time to expand into India. First, there is sustained economic growth at 7% per annum. We've seen this and demonstrated this over the last 10, 11 years. India is first among the world's best countries in which to invest. The government is really supportive of international companies entering the marketplace. There are consequential tax and non-tax incentives available to companies. There is an enormous investment in infrastructure planned through 2040. Remember, $5 trillion. There is a growing middle class with ever increasing purchasing power. India's economy is more open than any of the other emerging countries. And with Western Europe, South Korea, Japan, and even China aging, India's young, dynamic workforce is a potential that is unprecedented, absolutely unprecedented anyplace else in the world. It's a demographic advantage ready to be taken advantage of. Lastly, Indians have a strong appetite for USA goods and services. In 2017, the USA enjoyed a $136 billion balance of trade, positive balance of trade with India. This underlines the fact that Indians with new disposable income are looking for, searching for, and buying state-of-the-art American products that are so widely demanded and prized by them. We've talked about Maier+Vidorno and what Maier+Vidorno did in the 4 case studies, and one of the questions that we're very often asked is, why do we need a market entry specialist? Well, let us review the reasons why we believe a market entry specialist is best for you. First of all, when you're entering the Indian market, you want local knowledge. You want to have this knowledge supplied by someone who understands India and Indians. You also want to have your knowledge and to deal with someone who knows and understands how to cooperate with the Indian government to take full advantage of all the incentives that are available for companies entering the marketplace. You want to work with someone who knows and understands the markets, both being able to quantify and qualify them, as well as to be able to tell you about the competition, what its strengths are, what its weaknesses are. And the Indian market specialist also knows and understands the USA and Canadian business practices. And this is important because when you expand into a foreign country, you're expanding into a different culture. So the blending of those cultures and the ability to do that is very important. An Indian market specialist, if they've been in business for a period of time, they have a proven successful track record. They're experienced. They know what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. Well, how does Maier+Vidorno measure up to those requirements? Well, first of all, we are local. We have 4 strategically located Indian competence centers: Delhi, Chennai, Pune, and Bangalore, as well as 3 global offices: Germany, Japan, and the United States, which actually form a bridge between the foreign investor and the Indian marketplace and supply the local knowledge of the customers that we're bringing into the Indian marketplace. Maier+Vidorno is very successful. During their almost 20 years in business, they have assisted more than 1,200 satisfied customers and currently employ more than 150 highly trained specialists in virtually all of the disciplines of the business cycle. The bottom line is, working with Maier+Vidorno provides the expanding company a cost-effective value proposition. Just a quick look at some of our many clients, and what I'd really like to point out is that our clients, again, more than 1,200 of them, if you're looking for a referral from a company who has experience with us, virtually all of our 1,200 plus clients are glad to provide a referral as to what they did, how we worked with them, and why it was essential to their success. And now, my friends, we'll endeavor to answer as many of your questions as we possibly can. And we're going to go ahead and open the screen back up again, and we'll share the webcam now. And okay, the screen is being reopened, and we will begin the question and answer session. The first question comes from James in Denver. James says, our company supplies sub-assemblies for electronic transmission devices used by the transportation and security industries. We made a successful entry into the Chinese market and are wondering if India is right for us. How would Maier+Vidorno advise us to proceed? Well, James, this is a typical question that we see quite often, and our experience has confirmed that the best way to approach the potential entry into the Indian market is as follows. First, we would interview your company. We would find out what you do, for whom you do it, why they buy from you, why you succeed. Then we would take that information, and based on what you've told us, we would conduct a market research project on your behalf that would quantify, qualify the Indian market, do a complete competitive analysis, as well as discovering all of the barriers to entry that might be a problem issue for your company. Once that's done, and we would do that by both in-person and telephonic interviews with the major players in those particular markets that you want to serve. If the answer is yes, that the market is there, that it quantifies and qualifies, and you can dance very successfully with and against the competitors, you would then be in a position to select the mode of entry that you wanted to employ to enter that market, whether it was direct sales, whether it was through a distributorship, whether it was to establish a registered entity in India, or even something as ambitious as to begin an assembly plant or a manufacturing facility. Again, I'd like to point out that we will respond to all of these questions to all of the registrants in writing at the end of the presentation, sometime in the next 2 to 3 days. And the answers I'm giving now are probably what I would consider to be Reader's Digest answers. The answers in writing will even be more comprehensive. Okay? The second question comes from Lauren. Lauren in Hartford, Connecticut writes, many Chamber of Commerce's industry and professional groups traditionally have information available that provide market size and scope, as well as other pertinent information. What can Maier+Vidorno tell us that we cannot get from established trade and industry sources? Lauren, thanks very much for that question. First of all, the information that you can get from a Chamber of Commerce or industry trade sources We refer to that as kickstart information. That is a good place to start. That will give you a foundation, albeit a somewhat dated foundation, because all of that's printed and published. India is such a dynamic, evolving market that, my friends, really is changing literally daily. There will probably be something in the neighborhood of 250 or 300 different companies that will invest in India in calendar 2018. This means that this market is changing dramatically daily. So in order to really have solid information, solid intelligence on which you can make a go, no-go investment decision, it has to be contemporaneous. So we can use the Chamber of Commerce information as a basis point on which to begin and a foundation on which to build. But you really need contemporaneous information that can only be obtained through both in-person and telephonic interviews with the marketplace itself. Okay, our third question comes from, this is from Bill in Detroit. Bill writes, the Indian market, as can be seen from the steady upward trend in GDP, has been growing historically from the 1960s. Why do you feel that there is still room for international companies to successfully enter the Indian market? Bill, that is also a very good question. And admittedly, much has been accomplished. Much has been done in India in terms of market penetration and developing markets. But my friend, much remains to be done, both in the public and private sectors. It also should be pointed out that this big emerging middle class that we talked about earlier in the presentation, they are status conscious buyers. In other words, they don't want yesterday's products, they want tomorrow's products. And the same holds true with business to business activities. Manufacturing companies, assembly plants in India that are making in India for Indians, they want the latest products, the latest components in their products so that they can be as successful in the marketplace serving those status conscious buyers. And lastly, there are several sectors like healthcare, construction, and automation that are still lagging behind what I would call world standards. So while much has been done, Bill, much remains to be done. There is room for new investment in India. And to answer the question, my friends, is now the time to expand into India? We believe that it is. And my friends, it's my honor and privilege and pleasure again to thank you for being with us today. Again, you'll be getting answers to all of the questions we just addressed as we're now running out of time, and to any other questions we didn't get to. Those will be coming from my email address, which is martin.p@mv-india.com. And it would be best to check in your spam folder for those emails, because I don't believe I've communicated with any of you previously. So let us close today by wishing you all of the best, the happiest, the most joyous of holidays, and a new year that is filled to overflowing abundance with health, happiness, and prosperity for you and yours. Goodbye, and thank you again.